platformed on the biggest conservative platforms in the nation to spew this anti-Semitism. How do you address this? This is a headache I really didn't want. Here he is.
He is an anti-Semite. He's saying lots and lots of anti-Semitic things. I'm not sure what more there is to say about it.
A few moments ago.
Well, after West and his controversial comments, I think it's fair to say that the radical right is a little bit all over the place. And here we'll be reacting to the Kavernacle, who I think had a fairly good breakdown, and I mostly agree, but I will disagree with some key places. So we're kind of concentrate mainly on Dave Rubin because Ben Shapiro, at this point, doesn't really have any credibility. For those totally new, he heads the Daily Wire, which until recently was very pro-Trump and even pro-Kanye. But now Ben is pulling back his support and trying to blame this all on mental illness and saying he never really liked West in the first place. So he seems to be a complete opportunist. But Dave Rubin and Steve Crowder are in a more weird, difficult position where they're disagreeing with Kanye, but their reasons for disagreeing are pretty flimsy.
But the idea of your truth is a very leftist idea. It's a very woke idea. There is no such thing as your truth. And everything that Kanye is doing is leftist. It is based on all of the bad ideas, grouping people based off of race and religion and or sexuality. These are the bad ideas. You know, one of the things we criticize the left all day for, right? I do this almost every day on the show. I criticize the left because they don't know how to put some boundaries around their excesses, right? So when the racists of the left, the neo-racists and the real wokesters and the gender crazy people and all of those things, when they run rampage, the good liberals never stand up to them. They always fold in their face. Well, there's a challenge on the right now. Like, what does the right want to be? What does a broad conservative, let's say, coalition want to look like? Does it want genuine racists to be part of it? Or does it want to be a little more mature? Does it
walked in with intelligence? So Trump is really impressed with Nick Fuentes. And Nick Fuentes, unlike so many of the lawyers and so many people that he was left with on his 2020 campaign, he's actually a loyalist.
Because he continues to destroy his career and his wealth base based on his own foolishness, malice, and bigotry.
So apparently because Kanye said, my truths, he's now a left-wing Marxist communist. I mean, I understand what he's saying, that Kanye sometimes uses new age language. That doesn't make him a leftist. And also, by the way, if he actually studied these things seriously, the Nazis did that too. They had some weird, very strange religious esoteric beliefs. Yeah, this whole idea of mixing new age stuff with very virulent anti-Semitism is not new. He's not really saying anything. But I will disagree with Kavernacle a little bit. I do agree, Dave Rubin is just making this stuff up to try to get out of, frankly, taking responsibility for enabling people like West and others to be very extreme. But now that it's gone too far, they're trying to find some weird way to rewrite history. But I don't know if they're all saying the same thing. So Dave Rubin, I think, is in a very weird position where he's in this weird middle space between the extreme right and the outright Nazis. And him being Jewish, he can't be a complete Nazi, so he's kind of trying to be somewhere in between those two positions. But Crowder, and believe me, I'm not a big fan of this person, I think is saying something slightly different. So let's hear him speak.
Like Gab or Rumble, but let's have a look.
I don't think he hates Jewish people. I think he's been wronged, and I think that he's aiming sometimes a howitzer. He's being imprecise.
Right. Yes.
But he's not wrong about everything. Look, is there a conversation to be had about secular humanists with Jewish last names in Hollywood exploiting people in positions of, the performance arts talent? Yeah. And by the way, that happens in the conservative movement too, behind the scenes. Yeah. People sign contracts where they don't know what they're signing. Yeah, it's true. Is there a disproportionate number of people with Jewish last names in higher banking? That's an argument that can be made.
So in 30 seconds, Steven Crowder has managed to say one of the most anti-Semitic things I've heard out of conservative pundits' mouth. I also love the fact that he's calling them secular humanist Jews because...
Well, it's true that this language is very close to the usual old school anti-Semitism. But again, within that statement, he says, no, conservatives do this too. So there are, quote, conservatives in Hollywood and elsewhere that do exploit people. So to be fair to him, he's not blaming it only on one group. That's just not what he said. Is he embracing a bit of a conspiracy theory? Yes. And definitely it's a very thin line between the global conspiracy and the other kind of conspiracy. And the extreme right has played with both ideas for a very, very long time. So people on the outside are really shocked that they're saying these things. But the Kavernacle was right that this has been sort of there in the background for a very long time. However, I do disagree on three things. One, he says that anti-Semitism on the left, which Dave Rubin is pointing to and others, but it's not totally non-existent. It did exist before the 20th century, so it's not true to say it never existed before. It did exist, so we have to be careful there. I also disagree that Crowder is being an outright Nazi. I mean, again, I'm not a fan of Crowder, to be clear, but I don't think he's actually saying Nazism. Granted, it's not much better, but it's a different kind of conspiracy theory. You don't want to label every conspiracy theorist a Nazi. They do have nuances within their positions, good or bad. But on the third point, we mostly agree that, yeah, these are a bunch of grifters and opportunists. But I disagree that this is all about opportunism. I do think that there is, for lack of a better word, a real battle of ideas. Granted, these ideas are not that interesting, but this is a kind of intellectual back and forth that the quote conservatives and radical rightists are having for a long, long time. Whether Ayn Rand, who was Jewish herself, Bill Buckley, and these other people putting out this very extreme anti-communist, anti-liberal conspiracy theory and embedding it in these movements. But then when it goes too far, they want to control it. But substantively, their ideas are pretty fascistic. I will give Rand credit. She never embraced fascist dictatorships, unlike a lot of people. But her ideas, when you really look at them, are very authoritarian. She's not an individualist in any real sense. So it's interesting to see where the right is going. I do agree with the Kavernacle that their shifting of positions doesn't make any sense. They're really just trying to find these weird excuses. Oh, Kanye's talking New Age. Oh, he's mentally disturbed. It doesn't really add up. They're just trying to shed their responsibility for enabling this kind of rhetoric for decades. And now that it's coming out in the public, they're a little embarrassed and trying to rewrite the whole narrative. So I agree mostly with the video. It's a pretty good response, but I disagree with some of the way he's framing these issues. Good, solid response video, but I do think the left needs to be a little careful about that, quote, their side is entirely pure. I just don't think that's true. And, quote, that the other side is just completely made of anti-Semitic Nazis. Many of them are. There's no doubt about that, but many of them are not, although they are embracing very extreme positions that will probably lead to that eventually.
1. Ye West, Kanye West, he is a Jew hater. Pretty obviously, there is no way to avoid that conclusion. The stuff that he's been ranting and raving over the past several weeks demonstrates that he doesn't just hate specific Jews, he hates the Jews.
Happens that anti-Semitism, calling out anti-Semitism and having no quarter for anti-Semitism, more or less, is his branding. Super, super awkward at the Daily Wire commissary.